I will be joined in a few seconds by Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins. We're going to go over, as we usually do, each of the different issues that are updated information for you in terms of some of the key things happening in Westchester County. We're going to be joined in a second by New York State Assemblywoman Mary Jane Shimsky. And you may recall that Mary Jane was a member of the Westchester County Board of Legislators for 11 years. She was here in county government during my tenure as county executive, and now last fall she was elected to the New York State Assembly, and she's going to come to give us an update on some of her priorities, the things that she's worked on, and the successes she's had in that position. Then we'll be joined a little bit later by our Director of Economic Development, Bridget Gibbons, who's going to talk about one of our job fairs that we have coming up. I always make this commentary in general, I'll mention it again before we bring Bridget on, that what represents economic development is not simply trying to go after major companies to relocate into Westchester County, which was an effective strategy in the 1960s and in the 1970s. It's a much more subtle process now. What do we have to do to bring added value to businesses so that they can grow? And one of the major problems that businesses are having right at this moment in time is filling all the jobs that they have available, particularly jobs in certain categories. So Bridget will talk about the most recent upcoming one of our job fairs. We've targeted them for different constituencies, and this is one of the ones that she'll be reporting on. We'll give you an update of where we are with all of our different parks activities. We'll also give you an update on some scams that are out there that we want to bring to your attention, make sure that you're aware about what we're aware of. Ken will cover the free COVID tests that are available, and we'll talk about the current status of migrant populations in Westchester County. It's been static for a number of weeks now, but we'll talk about that in some greater detail. Let me first mention at the outset, before we bring on Mary Jane Shimsky, that right now we're all watching the headlines, as you are, coming out of Washington, D.C. The federal government appears poised to shut down the federal government as of Saturday, and that shutdown comes because the two houses cannot agree on a continuing resolution which would fund the government for some indeterminate length of time. Now, each of these different governments, the federal government, state government, county government, local governments, all operate on a budget. Just like you operate on a budget, a business, a not-for-profit organization has a budget. Generally speaking, it's an annual document, and there's different time frames by which the annual document is approved. And in its simplest form, it identifies areas of revenue, income, and then areas of expenditure. And then generally in the government world, and true in business and not-for-profit as well, they identify what is the level of staffing, what are the functions of those staffing, and all of that singular document is sort of the roadmap, fiscal and policy roadmap for the government for that year. It differs in different ways at different levels of government. The federal government has failed to adopt a federal budget over an extended period of time, and they have operated the federal government with continuing resolutions, which means an agreement to do certain things with funds for a defined period of time, not necessarily annualized, and then within it are certain policy requirements. Since it has to be negotiated between the two houses and the president, there are three decision makers, and that makes it more difficult. It's the same reason why the state government is a difficult area to operate in. You have a bicameral legislative body. You have a Senate and an Assembly in Albany, and you have a Senate and House of Representatives in Washington. And the two legislatures may not be of the same party control, nor of the same political philosophy in mind. That is different in the county and the local governments, where we have a unicameral legislature. In the case of the county, we have the Board of Legislators. When they act as a majority body, that legislative branch and our executive branch come together, we have a completed document. That is probably the single biggest reason why we have never had a late budget in Westchester County's history. We have never defaulted. We've never had a mid-year budget crisis in which we could not agree upon a certain amount of spending going forward. So that's a good track record for the county. It's a good track record for the municipal governments, but it's completely different in Washington, D.C. So we are now looking at operationally for Westchester County what the impact of the federal government shutdown will be on the things that we're required to do for which we interact with the federal government to provide them. Our initial took a quick look at the Westchester County Airport, because the federal government is involved in some of those different areas. It is our understanding that at this stage of the game, there's no operational impact at the county airport. The TSA members that involve security will be working without compensation, but because of the importance of their job, they will continue to work regardless. So there may be some reduction in screening managers and some of the federal security director positions, but the TSA officers will be continuing to function at the airport. Even more importantly, the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, has responsibility for air traffic control. That is critical. That's what directs the planes as to takeoff, landing, and what routes they take as they fly through the skies above us. And those air traffic controllers will continue to work regardless of their compensation or not getting compensation. At some point in time, the expectation is that there will be a settled agreement in Washington, and then back pay will be issued. But those air traffic controllers will be working anyway because the public safety requires that. So that is important. There is a contingency plan for late night flights, and we'll see what happens as it plays out. As happens in the state government, I did serve in the state legislature, as Mary Jane is now. You can have a late budget. It depends on how late it is to determine how much impact there will be. If this shutdown is of a few days' duration, perhaps a week duration, there may be no significant impacts that any of us feel. But if it becomes a locked-in battle between different ideologies, which it appears to be at this stage of the game, with one side being unwilling to compromise with the other side, if that happens, then there may be some long-term effects. We'll try to keep an eye on it, and we'll try to be thoughtful about what happens. There are certainly federal grant monies that we get to do certain programs. If this shutdown is a week in duration, that won't be affected. If it goes much beyond that, there will be impacts. You may recall there have been some federal shutdowns in the last few years. There was one, I think, in January a few years ago. That lasted the better part of a month, slightly into, I think, perhaps a second month. I don't recall exactly. But it's the length of time of the shutdown where things become more problematic. And certainly people cannot work without compensation on an indefinite basis. The people who get a paycheck need that money in order to live their lives and pay their bills and their mortgage and their rent and things of that nature. So we hope for the best. We hope that there will be compromise and a rational understanding of what happens in Washington. But in the meantime, in county government, we're going to prepare for that eventuality in case there are impacts on what we can do because of the federal role that's played in some of those operations that we have. This is a good time to mention that the county budget process is now underway as we have a calendar year fiscal year. Our fiscal year begins January 1st of each year, ends December 31st. We're now near the end of September, which is the end of the third quarter of the year. And as we go into October, deadline dates for budget preparations come up. We are right now trying to put final touches on our capital project plan, which will go before the Board of Legislators in the middle of October. Right now, legislators are suggesting projects that they think of importance in the community. You may be seeing them in a public setting, call for one thing or another to be done. We are trying to work all of those things into an agreed-upon plan that we can properly fund for this year and then for the years that will follow. By mid-October, that will be sent to the Board of Legislators. Mary Jane has many headaches as an Assemblywoman. This is not one of them because that's not her problem now, but she'll be worried about her budget come next spring. Once that is done, we have an operational budget that we will deliver to the Board of Legislators on or about November 10th. In the period between now and November 10th, we will hold a session. We're trying to figure out a location where we will invite input for people to come and talk to those of us in the executive branch to give us input on what they think should be in the budget. And citizens or organizations will be able to come. We'll announce the date and location probably within the next week. It'll fall sometime in the month of October. And for those who are involved, you can certainly come and share your thoughts. Over the last 4 years, we've been able to cut county property taxes, the county portion of your bill. Obviously, the school tax is a much bigger portion of your bill. We've been able to cut county taxes over the last 4 years and fund important necessary functions. That's on the basis of having sufficient revenue from all sources that balance out the expenditure side of the budget. So that's what we'll be working on. Come November 10th, the Board of Legislators, the public at large, will get our proposed budget for 2024. They'll begin deliberations on it. Generally speaking, by mid-December, the board completes its work, makes modifications, we negotiate, ultimately come up with some agreement, and it locks in. As executive, I hold the right to line item veto any of the additions that the Board of Legislators might put into the budget, but we try not to get to that point of crisis. That's much more of what happens at other levels of government. We've worked cooperatively and across the aisle, as well as between the two branches of government. So we'll be playing out our budget process. You'll hear certain things about it. Certainly, if you're active in some organization, the advocacy groups that you're active in will say, write your county legislator, write your county executive, tell them you need this for this purpose. And that is part of the the civic process. And we're not, concerned when people write us and tell us this is what we think you should focus on. Whether we can satisfy that need or not depends on a host of other issues, because there are so many different competing priorities. But we expect to do our diligence, and we expect that when we reach December 15th or so, we'll have an approved budget locked into place, and we'll be ready for the new year to begin on January 1st. Not so in Washington. We're waiting to see what comes out of this potential shutdown, and we'll try to be ready for all of that. So we'll go from the federal and the county government to the state government. New York State government, just to give you a rough fingertip ideas, probably about 100 times the budget of Westchester County. We're a $2.3 billion budget, and the state budget is in the $225+ billion category. The focus of the state government is extensive. It includes aid to education. It includes health care, things that are beyond the scope of what a county government does, even though there are some overlaps. We send 8 individuals to the New York State Assembly. We send another parts of districts that total 5 state senators to go and represent their philosophy as individuals, but also represent us as a geography. I had the pleasure of being in both the Assembly and in the Senate, and so I have great respect for the work that those folks do. A couple of weeks ago, we had Assemblywoman Dana Levenberg join us. The Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousin joined us a few weeks before that. We've had Senator Natalia Fernandez, who represents Pelham and part of New Rochelle and part of the Bronx, with us. And so today we have Assemblywoman Mary Jane Shimsky. And aside from being a longtime county legislator, Mary Jane in her current role represents the town of Greenburgh, the town of Mount Pleasant, and all of the relevant villages within those. Greenburgh has 6 villages. Mount Pleasant's got 2.5 villages. If there's other parts of her turf, she can outline it to you when she joins you here. But we're very happy to have her here back in the county office building, which she knows very well, to give us an update on state matters. Our Assemblywoman, Mary Jane Shimsky. Mary Jane, thank you for coming. The microphone is yours. Thanks.
Thank you very much, George, and good afternoon, everyone. What I wanted to talk about today was cooperation between state and local governments. What seemed to be the most routine of details, all the way up to major undertakings, often require the cooperation of multi-levels of government, the state government with, whether it's our county government, our municipal governments, to make sure that good things happen for the people we all represent. I thought it fitting that the county executive talked about the current issues taking place in Washington. One thing I found very interesting was I read somewhere that members of Congress continue to get paid no matter how long a budget impasse takes place. After a rather long one in Albany about 12 to 15 years ago, there was legislation passed that required that legislators do not get paid on the state level if there is an impasse between the legislature and the governor. They don't get paid until after the budget is agreed on. I think that may be a great thing for some members of our congressional delegation to look into. But going back to state and local cooperation, which seems to work an awful lot better these days. I've seen a great deal of it in my first year at the Assembly. As I said, sometimes there are matters that seem technical or minor that are very important to the continued good operation of our local governments. And those things often require state authorization to do. So we, the state government, have to be in negotiations, in discussions with our local governments to see what they need, and then make sure they get the required authorizations. For example, this year we worked with Westchester County on several home rule bills. That's what those bills are called, where local governments ask for cooperation. One, red light camera authorization to make our roads safer. One, permitting the county to increase their gun permit fees, which had not been increased in many a year. This will allow the county to pay for a system that will ensure that there is a robust oversight on who is being allowed to carry guns, which we all know is essential to public safety. We also agreed to extend the Westchester sales tax, which of course is essential to keep our property taxes down, and the Westchester Guardian ad litem bill, which sounds very technical, but essentially what it will do is it will enable the county to work with landlord-tenant cases much more effectively. We also did local bills. For example, extended the hotel tax for the town of Mount Pleasant. Also important to keep sales taxes under control. We have several others that we're working on with all of our local governments. Red light cameras with the town of Greenberg is a possibility, as are many other things. One of the other things that we end up doing together is funding our infrastructure. Our infrastructure is needed for us to carry on our lives, whether it's roads, bridges, wastewater treatment plants, mass transit, internet, and water providing, and so on. Some of those pieces of infrastructure are owned by federal, some state, some local governments. And maintaining and updating our infrastructure has grown tremendously in price, in part because of inflation, in part because these pieces of infrastructure are getting much more wear and tear than was originally anticipated. Some of it is the effects of climate change already. But we have to work together with our local governments to make sure that they get the resources they need to fix their infrastructure. As one quick example, on August 31st, Speaker Hasty visited 3 communities in the 92nd Assembly District. 2 of them, the village of Tarrytown and the village of Dobbs Ferry, had bridges which lead to the train stations, to the waterfront. In the case of Tarrytown, they lead to numerous housing developments. Both of these bridges are in serious need of repair. So when Speaker Hasty saw the situation and discussed with me and with the local officials, we agreed as a state government to help fund the repairs for our local government's part of these critical infrastructure installations. We're going to be announcing over the course of the next several months additional funding for municipalities, school districts, and not-for-profits. We also have worked this year on increasing the money for local road repairs. With the help of my colleagues, I circulated a sign-on letter to urge the Speaker to increase money for local road repairs. We got an extra $100 million in the state budget this year. That number is going to have to keep growing, and I promise to continue working on that. These are just a few of the hundreds of examples as to how the state government has to work together with our local governments to make sure that the people we represent have everything they need to succeed in life and have long, secure, and happy lives. And I am proud and honored to work with my municipal officials and with my county executive on making sure that so many of these things can get done, which improves the life of everyone. So thank you very much, and thank you for the time, George.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure to have you with us. Mary Jane Shimsky, State Assemblywoman, representing some of the Hudson River villages and the towns in that side of the county. We're very happy to have her here, and we intend over the course of the next few weeks, as we have municipal officials to join us, we'll also ask other members of our state delegation to be with us here, senators and assembly members, so they too can share what they're working on. I'm going to ask Ken Jenkins to join us, and then the next thing I want to touch on is a couple of concerns that are out there, scams, if you will, that are being perpetrated on individuals, which you should be aware of, and get the public message out. I know that we do these updates, it's not must-see TV. People watch it if they really follow inside government and maybe something comes up that has some broad benefit that somebody else may want to learn about. But if you're watching this and you find this to be important, do share this information with other people in your family and your neighbors. The first one, there is a scam out there in which callers are asserting that they're calling on behalf of the Westchester County Sheriff's Office. Now, Westchester County has a Department of Public Safety, the county police. We do not have a sheriff's office as other counties do. Many people do not know that. Other counties have elected sheriffs. So when they get a call from the Westchester County Sheriff's Office, that immediately should set off an alarm bell that this is a bogus call. These individuals who are being called are being scammed by people falsely posing as police and claiming that there's a warrant out for the arrest of the individual that they're speaking to. That immediately raises concerns that someone is calling you to tell you that there's a warrant out for your arrest. These scammers, when they have you on the phone, these police impersonators will then proceed to claim that you have failed to appear for grand jury duty, and that is what is being alleged. And they give you a phone number that if you call, you can press 1 and press 2, but it's a fake menu, but it sounds very professional from the sheriff's office. It attempts to try to extract money from you. Do not fall for it. Do not fall for it. If any of our professionals have need to speak to you, they will show up at your house. They will have proper identification, and they'll make clear what the purpose of their visit is for. If you are a victim of this particular scam, call the county police at 914-864-7700. If you have any capacity to record messages on your home phone, or if you get a message that comes in that you get in your voicemail, retain that material so that they may be used in trying to track down these scammers. There have been incidents of this over the last month or two, and there's an active investigation going on. But don't fall for it. Westchester County Sheriff's Office calls. The second scam is one that's being administered or implemented by people who are trying to disenfranchise you from voting. And the New York State Attorney General's office, Tish James, has sent a cease and desist order to a group of citizen vote vigilantes. This is a group, they're self-named the New York Citizens Audit. They come to your door, approach your home, and they've done so over the summer, not in Westchester, but in many other counties in the state. They claim to be state or local election officials, and they falsely accuse you of committing voter fraud. And this generally involves people that have moved from one location to another and how you've registered to vote. There was a media alert sent by the State Board of Elections saying that they've received reports of people who are confronting voters regarding their registration status and erroneously accusing voters of committing a crime because of how they appear in the state voter base. And this is in a wide number of counties in upstate, but also next door in Putnam and Orange County as well. This has not happened in Westchester County yet, but keep an eye out for it. If you're confronted by somebody at the door, do not engage in a conversation with them. Ask to see their name and identification. Copy that down. If they come to your doorbell and ring, and you have a ring type mechanism that records a picture of them, retain that information. And once again, let's report it in. We'll use the county police as the proper reporting agency for the moment. 864-7700. This is an effort to try to impact people and in essence tell them that they won't be able to vote. And I think we've seen, certainly in the society, we've reached a point at which there is every trick in the book being used to try to take money from you, to try to get you to do something that you would not normally do voluntarily, and we want you to be aware of it. Both of these two scams, if there's others, we'll be happy to share it with you. Jim Mazzano, who chairs our Office of Consumer Protection, has been involved in dealing with lots of scams of this nature, and there's many of them that we know about. Somebody who calls claiming to be your grandchild. My oldest grandchild's 8 years old, so it's highly unlikely that this would be the person calling me, but to try to extract money from grandma, grandpa, all of these types of things. This is a complicated society we live in. Much is on electronics, and people can get information about you. If they get just a little bit more information than what they have already, they may be able to tap into your accounts and some very dire circumstances. So please be aware of this, and hopefully you won't fall for these scams, that you've been made aware of them. Next up, free COVID tests, and Ken will cover that with us. Ken.
Thanks, George. Starting the 25th, yesterday, the Biden administration, President Biden has allocated $600 million of funding to facilitate the manufacturing of at-home COVID test. So additionally, while you can do this, you can also activate on a website. That particular website is COVID test, so COVID tests.gov, and you can order online, and you can have up to 4 test kits that would be mailed to your house. Wanted to put something else in there, that there is on that same website, when you go to the website, there is a link there to check your existing COVID test to see if the expiration date has been extended. And that happened for many of the COVID tests that were made available. You know, we distributed them. The date on those are not necessarily expiration date, so check that before you just discard the ones that you have to make sure that the date has not been extended. If it has been extended, great. If it hasn't been extended, that is where you want to dispose of those properly, whether that's at a medical facility like at a drugstore or at the local police departments. You don't want to just flush them down the toilet or anything like that, because that would be really, really bad. But you want to make sure to dispose of those properly. And again, the proper the proper disposal for those are at one of those facilities where you can just put in the drugs that have expired. That happens at all of the drugstores. Some hospitals, some police stations, or most police stations have that as well. And we do that as well on our household recycling days. So keep an eye out for those as well. We do those drug take-backs at that as well. So once again, 4 free COVID tests, covidtests.gov, and those are available to you right now. You can go on the website and order those up. Thanks a lot. Back to you, George.
Thank you very much, Ken. Next up is Bridget Gibbons, who is our Director of Economic Development. As I said when we hyped this a little bit up front, we have a very interesting job fair, one of many, and this one is coming up shortly. So, Bridget, please tell us about what's happening. So you get a little helping hand out here.
Thank you very much.
And it's all yours, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you, County Executive. Employers in Westchester County are experiencing a worker shortage and struggling to fill positions. There are gaps across the board in every sector: construction, advanced manufacturing, hospitality, and this dynamic has forced employers to get creative about where they're finding their workers. Westchester's unemployment numbers are at historic lows, just 3.1% today, lower than the state average of 3.9%, but that overall number doesn't reflect every segment of the workforce, and some of whom are still struggling to find a job. Since the pandemic receded, the county's been working to bring employers and job seekers together, and this includes holding job fairs around the region, targeting specific populations with high unemployment rates. In particular, those with a history of justice involvement are often overlooked as potential hires. Therefore, I'm pleased to announce that we'll be holding a job fair for formerly incarcerated justice-impacted individuals and other underserved people on Wednesday, October 18th from 10 to 2. This in-person event will be held at the Yonkers Riverfront Library at 1 Larkin Center in Yonkers. The day will start with job applicants meeting and networking with companies to hire, looking to hire, and we anticipate on-the-spot interviews. Later, there will be 2 panel discussions focusing on key issues such as know your rights, expungement, and how to avoid scams. The panels will be followed by lunch and then more networking and hiring discussions. Numerous resource providers will be who are supporting this community will be there to answer questions and provide assistance. We're happy to be partnering again with Andre Part, who is himself formerly incarcerated and the founder of Untapped Solutions, which serves untapped individuals, connects them with inclusive employers, and partners with social enterprises for economic and social empowerment. And he is also a graduate of our Element 46 Tech Accelerator program. We're also thankful to be partnering with the New York State Attorney General's office and the Westchester County DA's office. We understand that securing a steady job is an important part of integrating into our community. We're pleased to have so many employers from across the region joining us for this important event. To register as an employer or a job seeker, visit our website, westchestercatalyst.com, and click on events at the top of the website. If you have any questions, you can contact me at 914-995-2952. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Bridget Gibbons, our Director of Economic Development. And We've had, as I mentioned, a number of different job fairs that target some of these particular entities. We had a very successful one within the last month for those who have disabilities, and we found certain employers that were happy to hire some of these individuals. We've had ones that involve people with different base languages, foreign languages, and we've had some success with that. So we're looking for ways to help complement what the business community needs for hiring of individuals. This is yet another one of those ideas, and Bridget and her team, we thank you very much for that effort. Next up, I'm just going to touch very briefly on one of these issues that really has just sort of manifested itself not that long ago, and that is the spotted lanternfly. I guess we've seen a couple of them in our houses, and they are a new infestation. They're rather distinctive-looking insects, and we really didn't have much of an exposure to this, but now that they have come, and they've come in great quantities to Westchester, as they've other places, they are dangerous to vegetation. They will kill certain kinds of plants, and the way they cluster and how they feed. They're not poisonous, they're not injurious to humans or animals, but they can devastate plant life, and so we are trying to do what we can do to eradicate them as much as we can. The strategy that is being used by Westchester County is to use high-powered vacuums to suck up these lanternflies, and in so doing, that's our fastest way to take them off of the plants that they're infesting. The concern about spraying might be injurious to the lanternflies, but it could have a side negative to other insects that we don't want to harm, that aren't doing harm to the vegetation, and it could also harm the vegetation. So the best case thinking has been to go through the process of using vacuuming to suck up these lanternflies. And with that in mind, we have, through our Parks and Recreation Department, undertaken that effort in many of our county parks. Now, keep in mind that we have deep woods and literal acres upon acres of land that's almost impossible for us to secure. We start out with our paths, our popularly used paths, and then work inland from there. But now we've made available to some of the local governments, for their purposes, additional vacuums that we can loan to local municipalities, which they can use to once through. They don't have to buy it, so it's not an expense to them. They obviously have to have the manpower to use it in their local parks. But many of our villages and towns of a certain size and scope, to go out and to obtain additional equipment, no matter how relatively inexpensive it is an additional cost. And all of these costs ultimately find their way into tax dollars. So given the size and scope of the county, we've obtained additional units for vacuums, and we make them available to the local governments on loan, and we'll do our best to sort of stamp out this to the extent possible. Mother Nature is a much bigger reality than we are as the county government, so what's going to solve that problem in the long run is a little more difficult, but we're trying to address it that way, and we hope effectively in the short term. But these are, dangerous infestation. Obviously, in your own backyard and your property, you want to try to get rid of them in an environmentally sensitive way. There are certain ways that you can do that. If you have any questions, you can go online, and that information is available to you online. But we as a county government will do our share with local governments to try to deal with this in parks and in nature centers. We have a whole long list, as we always do, of parks activities coming down the last week of Bicycle Sunday and a few other activities. Ken will cover those. Ken?
Thanks, George. Starting on Saturday, September 30th, is going to be from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. It's the Nature Sketchbook Walk at the Marshlands Conservatory. It's right up in Rye. So a lot of folks that enjoy that kind of walk, having sketching for nature. It has a great practice for building nature observation skills, and can be a wonderful mindfulness practice. In this relaxed and guided program, we're going to capture a quick representation of natural objects, landscape features, and more as we walk around the landscape. So you have to bring your own sketchbook and pencil, but it's free. Or you actually can borrow one of our pencils, but not a sketchbook. So you got to bring your own sketchbook for the Nature Sketchbook Walk at the Marshlands Conservatory. And again, it's going to be a fun time. We'll have we're supposed to have a lot less rain going into this weekend than we had over this past weekend. So keep your fingers crossed. It's supposed to be a wonderful weekend to do that nature walk, 10 to 11:30 up in Rye. Same time on Saturday, September 30th, In the afternoon from 2 to 3:30, we're going to have Click and Stitch. That's embroidered photography, and that's going to be up at Muscoot Farms in Somers. That's where you're going to be able to learn basic embroidery stitches and make and take home embroidered prints of the farm animals up at Muscoot Farm. This is really for ages 8 and older, so if you fit in the category 8 and older, to participate in there for Click and Stitch, that's $10 per person, but you'll have a wonderful time up at Muscoot Farm, right up in Somers, right off of 35. We have on Sundays, and that's going to continue from 9:30 to 2:30 every Sunday until November 19th. We have our farmers market at Muscoot Farms as well. That weekly market supports farmers and sustainability efforts in the area. It features more than 20 local vendors every week. They change around, and you never know where you're going to see the county executive. And you want to make sure to be able to participate in that every Sunday right up until November 19th. As County Executive Latimer just pointed out, this is coming up the final week of Bicycle Sunday. It actually starts a little earlier than normal, just because at 9 o'clock in the morning, because they're going to assist for the Tour de Yonkers. So that's the Yonkers Bike Club. They do a 12-mile run, 25-mile run. It's a separate thing that happens, but they close down the Bronx River Parkway an hour earlier at 9 a.m. this final Sunday, usually from 10 till 2, but it starts at 9 a.m. to accommodate the riders of the Tour de Yonkers. So again, these very, very festival things are in our 18,000 acre nationally recognized park system. It's your park system. Make sure you take advantage of it. Back to you, George.
Thanks very much. So we're going to close out our report by giving you the update on the migrant asylum seeker situation. And basically, we've had no real change in the number of asylum seekers that have been placed by New York City in Westchester County now, stretching back over 3 months. We have stabilized that situation. At present, we have 149 rooms spread out over 3 locations, the 3 we've talked about repeatedly, the Ramada Inn in Yonkers, the Ardsley Acres Inn facility in Ardsley, and the Courtyard on Central Avenue Motel in White Plains. None of those facilities have added significant numbers of rooms to their original block. No other facility in Westchester County has contracted with New York City to provide additional rooms. Those 149 rooms represents 412 total migrant asylum seekers. 132 of them are children. There are one of all of them that have been identified as being over the age of 5, requiring education, and the balance, 280, are adults of the total that we have, total of 412 individuals placed. I remind you, as I remind every time we have this conversation, so you can put it in perspective, these 3 locations have been managed with the assistance of 2 organizations, West Hab in Yonkers and Doc Go in Ardsley and White Plains. We've had our interactions with them. We've worked through some issues. There's been some voluntary assistance from some of the not-for-profit groups. Most notably, Neighbors Link has been helpful, along with some other ones as well. And we've been able to manage all 3 of these sites without any incidents of crime and without any incidents of spread of disease. Our county health department has gone in to make sure the vaccinations that were necessary were done. We had some help from some of the neighborhood health centers, Sun River Health System being one of them, and we've been able to manage this appropriately so far. What we're seeing in New York City is a continual flow coming up from the Texas border. And I think it's important to remind people of a couple of facts that they tend to forget in this whole situation. The immigration system is broken. It's a federal issue. It has to be repaired. It requires bipartisan support in Washington to do that. And there are differences, as there is on the budget issue, between the 2 parties. They are not in agreement as to what to do. You know the dynamics of it. I don't need to repeat them. But there are some that do not want any improvement of the system. They want, no inbound immigration at this point forward. We also need to remind you that in addition to there being no crime and no disease spread, that we had in Westchester County 5 years ago in 2018, 1,000 migrant children placed here in 4 locations. And in those 4 locations, they were placed here by the Trump administration, which was in office at the time. And we had those 1,000 children here for almost a year in duration. We're now about 3 months, 4 months in for those that are here under this situation, 412 individuals now, 1,000 residents 5 years ago. They're a year in duration, so far 3 to 4 months in duration, so there's really no comparison between the 2 experiences. But because of the politics of the world, there's been a focus on this particular situation in a way disproportionate to what happened 5 years ago, which we were able to manage without incident, without crime, and without disease spread. We will continue to keep you posted. If there's any change in those numbers, we'll be happy to address them. We have heard, as many have, rumors that abound. Every single day, somebody tells me they're here, or they're there, or they're someplace else. We look at every single one of those rumors. We investigate them. We do not get to approve or disapprove of any of these placements. They're contracts between New York City and a facility. But at this stage of the game, there have been no additional placements anywhere in the county. We assert that, we verify it, and we make sure that that's the case. So that is where we stand with migrants at present. Obviously, we hope for a couple of things. We've asked, and we will repeat asking, for a separate satellite immigration court to be established in White Plains, in the federal courthouse right here in downtown White Plains, and every migrant that's been placed in Westchester County have their cases put on the docket of the White Plains-based federal immigration court so that those cases can be adjudicated and the individuals can come to some closure and then no longer need to have placement in a temporary hotel, that their final case is resolved in one fashion or another and they can move on to whatever their next reality is. We have called for that. We will continue to call for that. The federal government has not acted on that comment or request at this stage. Again, we think it's simple and it's wise, and it would help us tremendously in adjudicating this. And of course, we're all looking for expedited work permits. There was policy that came from the Biden administration that may make that possible for those that have emigrated here from Venezuela because of the political crisis in Venezuela. That will be resolved at the federal level, but if it can be resolved and it allows those who are here to work, then that is the best strategy of all, to have people work legally, pay taxes on the work that they do, and contribute to the society. And as we just heard from Bridget, there are many businesses here that have a lack of employment demand. There's not enough people to do the work, entry-level jobs in a host of different fields, and the businesses need that employment work. If folks are prepared to work, then we can match that up. They can be productive, contribute to the society economically while they're waiting for their cases to be adjudicated. That's why they're here. They're here legally because they've come to the state, the federal government, asking for asylum. And the federal government, through the court system, is determining whether to grant them asylum or not. And they can stay here until that adjudication is made. And that's why they're here, quote unquote, legally. We understand this is a very volatile political issue. I deal with people who, challenge me at every turn. I respond with factual response. And of course, I always respond in the measure with which I receive it. If a person reaches me with a degree of courtesy, the proper courtesy that we should have in this society, I'm more than happy to be courteous and give them the information and answer it. I personally, throughout the course of my life, also respond in kind when I'm approached by people who have an attitude or an edge. I am not unhappy to return that edge or that attitude. I think it's perfectly appropriate, and as a native New Yorker, and I think it also shows you that we're not fooling around. We're not kidding here. This is serious business. Government is serious business. It's not a joke. If you don't agree with my particular politics, you have a right to have a different opinion. But you don't have a right to misstate facts. And if you happen to agree with my opinions, that doesn't make you perfect either. You still have to be responsive to the things that happen in this society. We all have to play it straight down the middle. That's the way we try to do it. I hope you agree. And if you don't, you have your opinion. I certainly have mine. Have a wonderful day. I'm George Latimer, County Executive. Thanks for watching.